ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to our latest edition of the DotPro Wednesday show. I am back from Shanghai, reunited with my co-host Woodshrew, and today we have a special guest with us, none other than Kyle Beef Bautista, the general manager of compLexity. Welcome, gentlemen.
Welcome to the show.
So, Kyle, you're finally back. There's a bit of a delay, right, with the flights and such. But how are you feeling right now, and how was the journey back from Shanghai?
Tired, in one word. But the journey back, I mean, once we were actually on a plane, it was not painless at all. And so we're definitely glad to be back. But yeah, as you said, we had definitely had some issues with flights and ended up getting delayed almost 4 full days as a result of it. But the guys are home and practicing, and they're actually leaving for Dota Pit tomorrow.
Oh, I was just going to bring that up. So you guys are not much rest for the weary, as usual. No. Headed right off to Croatia, right, or something for this tournament?
Correct, Croatia.
All right, well, let's start with an introduction. Obviously, many people within the community know who you are or have heard of you, but to the uninformed viewer, what exactly is your role as the general manager? Because we know that they're team managers, but you seem to have a much broader span of duties and responsibilities.
Yeah, so I'm the general manager of compLexity. Basically, that means that I'm in charge of day-to-day operations for the entire organization. I have a team of managers that I work with that are both staff managers as well as squad managers that run each of the other divisions, such as Hearthstone, Counter-Strike, Call of Duty, StarCraft, our stream team. Those guys all work with me, but Dota's my personal project, so I oversee everything with them. I live near their team house, work with them at most events, although I won't be going to Dota Pit with them just because I do have a little bit of work I need to catch up on. But yeah, I take care of a lot of the day-to-day and more broad stuff, not specifically limited to Dota.
So if anything is pressing in terms of the players' concerns or any issues that they have on hand, they go to you.
Exactly. We're here to make sure that the players are focused pretty much exclusively on playing the game and getting better. Everything else is something we worry about.
Mm-hmm.
So that's something I was wondering about. It says on your Twitter that you're a Dota 2 fiend, and when we first met at MDL, you talked about how you've basically done a lot, basically every role within the scene you've filled. You've organized tournaments, you've written stuff, you do interviews, obviously, and you're basically a jack of all trades in the scene. So how is it that you came to be interested mainly in this Dota 2 squad? Was it like a personal connection, or just the game itself that drew you to it?
I mean, I was in school for veterinary school about 5 years ago, and decided that I didn't want to be in school until I was like 30-something, and so took a little bit of break, and I actually started doing some StarCraft broadcasting on the side, and it was something that I had definitely been really interested in eSports back then, and it did not really have much success. I was getting like 100 views on YouTube videos and whatnot, but eventually I was playing Heroes of Newerth, actually with Merlini back in like 2009.
Wow.
And I had always been playing that game, loved that game, and then I got an opportunity to do casting for a company called compLexity Gaming, and ended up casting scrims with our team. Our team at that time was some people that you guys might know named PPD and Moon that were on that team. And Peter was actually the person that hired me for compLexity as a volunteer at that time, and just kind of worked my way up through compLexity as a scrim broadcaster, and then a broadcasting expert, then a journalist, then a content manager, then general manager. And along the way, I mean, I had been doing mostly Han stuff. I had external jobs as well, in addition to compLexity, and that's where I met Seafreak, Swindle, Chessie, Limp, Hanskin. I've known these guys for like 4 years now, and basically before they ever played their first game of Dota 2, many of them at least, I said I want Swindle as my captain, and I want to build a team with him. And he had not played his first game yet, and I was already trying to recruit him, and that's kind of the story.
Oh, so Well, there was kind of a bad joke back in the days, in the late 2000s, something about how all the Tier 3 Dota players went to Heroes of Newerth and all that. But looking at the scene now, and you've done plenty of interviews and fielded questions about this, Heroes of Newerth has a huge imprint on Dota right now, especially in the Western scene. Even at dinner, some of the Chinese commentators were talking about, you can see Heroes of Newerth strategies, for example, with OG. Obviously, you mentioned PPD and Kyle. A lot of these guys have a Heroes of Newerth background. So what was it about that game you think that's led to such success and translated so well to Dota?
I think one of the things that you actually notice from that is a lot of those successful people, such as Moon and Kyle and Peter, they didn't really have Dota backgrounds before that. I mean, you have a lot of people that have made the Dota stop, especially notably guys like Loda and Ake that made the stop there in Han. But those guys were fresh blood, and in order to get noticed, because they didn't have any of that background, they had to work really, really, really hard. Both Swindle and Peter, even Moon, they were all just pub stars, like literally pub stars that weren't taken seriously at all back in the day. But they worked harder than anyone and made sure that their names were noticed. And so I think when you go through that kind of adversity and you set up that kind of a work ethic, you certainly set yourself up for some serious improvement, and you get pretty well respected by your peers. From that point on, you're able to build some pretty solid teams, and especially with people like Peter and Swindle and even Hanskin as captains of their various teams throughout the years, they did a very good job of trying to redefine the metas and try to one-up each other. So I think that there was a lot of fierce competition between those squads back in the day that really caused the teams to try pretty hard, and that carried over to Dota and was amplified, 10 times over because of the money, and then of course the increased desire to win said money.
That's really cool that this roster of players, even a bunch of these players that have had some history with compLexity Gaming, are really shaping the current Dota scene. It feels like, at least in the Chinese scene, a lot of the players have been long-standing Dota 1 players. But it almost feels like this new generation of younger Western players have their roots in Han. Would you agree with that?
I certainly think so. I mean, if you look at what I would consider maybe the most competitive part of Han, a lot of people would say that was back when Fnatic was playing, and I disagree. As a caster and analyst at the time, I would say that would have been Han Tour Vegas, and if you actually look at that, I believe 15 of the 20 players at that event are now on a top 20 Dota team in the world.
Wow.
So, yeah, I would say that Han definitely has really helped to shape the Western scene. I think the history, as well as the work ethic and the natural skills developed in that game, the mechanics necessary in that game, were maybe a little bit more demanding. Just because of the faster pace, although Dota certainly has a lot more of a strategic element and different kinds of mechanics as well.
So when we met at MDL, you talked about some of the things that, for some of the tournaments back in the Han scene and all of that. And obviously, we're going to ask you about the tournaments in China coming up soon. But do you think that was part of the adversity as well that contributed to the players having to struggle a little bit more and see how difficult the opportunities were to establish themselves as professional players?
I think we don't take anything for granted. I think that's certainly one thing that you can say, at least about my team and perhaps about Han players more widespread. But in this case, I'm going to talk a little bit about my team. Specifically that these guys, they trained all year for one LAN, maybe two LANs, something like that. And so now when we have the opportunity to go to 15 this year or something like that, we don't take it for granted. We aren't going to accept an invite to a LAN or win a qualify for a LAN and then not show up. It's not part of our work ethic. We care a lot about these things. We care a lot about our fans because we've never had many fans before. We've never really had that exposure. We've never had good events and good journalists and all these different things. So it certainly does help a little bit that I think they did have kind of an adverse background. And so they really do appreciate the opportunities that they're being given right now, and they're going to do everything that they can to make sure that those opportunities are not squandered.
All right, and we've seen evidence of that certainly as the team has performed better and better even just over the course of that month from MDL moving onwards to the major. And Kyle is very confident, as you mentioned, your franchise player being very confident about NA Dota being here to stay and being there to make its mark. So I guess we'll move on to Shanghai, the big fish, I guess. And so, from your perspective as a manager, I guess we'll open it up really generally. Like, what did you think of Shanghai, overall?
The Shanghai Major or the city?
Sorry, the Shanghai Major.
Oh man, some incredible Dota, like some truly incredible Dota with some great storylines. The entire scene kind of overcoming adversity. But unfortunately, the production and the organization side was marred by serious amounts of miscommunication and a really big cultural barrier.
Wow. Do you think those issues that came across in like production and maybe even organization of the tournament, do you think that had an impact on player performance and like their mentality and their ability to focus on just the games?
I don't think anybody wants to make an excuse and say that it negatively affected their performance, but everyone was distracted, and that's for sure. I don't know if it actually had an effect or not, but we were certainly reading the threads, talking to the people that were affected. At some point, some of my players were definitely involved in some of the public outcry, trying to help rally support for reform and whatnot. So there was certainly time being used in that regard that should have probably been allocated toward either playing the game, thinking about the game, actually prepping for the matches, or resting. But at the same time, I don't think that it was a truly significant portion. I think that the managers tried to do their best to alleviate the stress from the players in that regard. And anything that the players wanted to do and that they were going to take into their own hands, they were going to do that one way or the other. I mean, there's nothing that's going to be able to stop me from having Swindle go out and speak his mind on Twitter about things that he feels that are unjust. You know, there's sometimes where if he's going too overboard, I'll point that out to him and we'll rectify that. But if he wants to speak out on something, he's going to. And if the players feel something's ridiculous and something's slighted, they're going to tell the people there. And if the people there aren't paying attention, they're going to find somebody that does pay attention.
Yeah, reach the people, so to speak. So in terms of making it easier for the players, there was some talk about how compLexity really showed up in force in terms of personnel and even like the team, the chef. Like, could you talk a bit about the preparation in terms of just the travel, maybe bringing translators, or like what you anticipated, what you needed to bring?
We didn't actually bring a translator, so they were very clear that we would have our own translators, and I actually even spoke to ours before we got there. Her name is Lorraine, and she is fantastic. She was a very good translator, works as a local tour guide, had pretty much zero experience in eSports previously, but she worked really, really hard to make sure that the team was taken care of, and we really appreciated her efforts. But as far as bringing personnel, as you had mentioned, we brought Josh, the team, I call him like a team manager, but he's our chef. He lives with the guys, and they love him. And he's also got a little bit of a Dota background. He's like 3K or something, but he does at least play the game, and he participates in a lot of scrims and such. So he can help the guys stay focused. I actually call him like a morale coordinator or something like that, because he really does, like, he has just this exuberance, this youthful energy, and just joy emanates out of him. So it's really hard to be mad when you're around him. So we said, okay, we're going to bring him to this event and see what happens. And he definitely enjoyed himself. But in addition, we brought myself as well as Fantasy, one of our other managers. And as I had said earlier, I mean, the jobs of the managers and the support staff is to make sure that the players can only focus on the game. That's all we want them focusing on. We don't want them having to focus on going out and finding food, or going out and getting medicine, or figuring out how are we getting to the airport, or how are we getting to the venue, what time do we need to be there, going to meetings. None of that. Like, it is our job to make sure that all of that is taken care of and they're informed, so that they're not having to worry about that. And at an event like the Shanghai Major, or anything in China, anything in a place where we're not really comfortable, it really does redouble the responsibilities of the support staff.
Had you I've been wanting to ask you, had you been in China before for like a big tournament or with a team before MDL, which was obviously a month before the Shanghai Major? Like, if that happened, like, did that help you out in terms of knowing what to expect, or what to tell the players to be ready for?
These were my first two tournaments in China personally. I've coordinated with a couple of managers that have gone to China in the past, but that was my first time setting foot on Chinese soil.
Awesome. Is there anything particularly memorable outside of the tournaments in Dota about China that, either good or bad, that you did really just stuck to you?
I would say that. I would say the one thing that actually struck me as just really crazy, in my opinion, was just the cultural differences. I did not expect that, as far as the culture of face and just the way that people kind of handle themselves, especially in confrontations over there. I normally kind of I portray this big, loud, angry American and kind of get my way, and that doesn't really work in China. Just because that's not how they act, and they don't know how to respond to it. And so it took a little bit of reading on my part before I kind of started to understand what I was doing wrong in that regard. And after I kind of changed my mannerisms and changed the way that I interacted with people, I found myself having a lot of success. But there's certainly a very large cultural divide that I don't think a lot of people put enough emphasis on and take the time to learn about.
Did you post it earlier? There was an article earlier talking about face and like going into detail about that. I think it was from you or someone that I saw.
I posted one on Twitter. Yeah, I read a few essays on it and some excerpts from a book, just trying to kind of bring myself up to speed because it just didn't seem like I was getting anywhere with some of the Chinese organizers and admins.
And of course, if you guys are looking for that Twitter, it's correct me if I'm wrong, at @COL_beef, and of course you'll be able to find his Twitter and the article there. So, one quick note before we wrap on just those tournaments and we start talking in more detail about the team. What things did you find to be good or positive about the two tournaments in China that you attended, or things that you found to be pleasant or maybe unusually well organized or even better than, say, Western tournaments? Was there anything of that nature?
Let's see. I think that the actual the experiences of playing, I think, were pretty good in both places. I mean, there were certainly issues with booths at both events, but having the access to practice rooms and, of course, having all the teams nearby and whatnot, it certainly gave us a lot of time to grow as a team. The one thing that I will say is that the hotels were probably, I would say, among the nicest, if not the nicest, that I've actually had in a really long time, maybe ever. Definitely nicer than the TI hotel, I believe. So that's one thing that was really nice. The staff, like the English speaking staff and the translators. I mean, Jack, yourself, Helen, we had Bien, as well as Lorraine that had been helping us at the various events. Just extremely nice, willing to go way out of their way to help you out as much as they possibly can. So that was also something that was really nice to have.
All right, well, I guess we'll move on to the team and their performance in Shanghai. So, coming into the tournament, what were some of the expectations within the team? I mean, I know that you have a really unique relationship especially in eSports with Swindle, your franchise player, and he was on the panel talking about he's very confident in his drafting and on the team's grasp on this meta. And what were some of the expectations coming in?
I think the expectation was at minimum top 8. I think we would have been very disappointed with anything lower than top 8, but I don't think anyone would have been surprised if we were finishing top 3. We were definitely confident coming into this, and unfortunately we were seeded into the group of death, and losing to the second and third place teams at the event in our group certainly was not great for our confidence. We had a little bit of a mental breakdown, I guess, between the days of the group stage and the main event, but we overcame that and, of course, went into the best of ones strong and ended up taking top 6, which I think everyone's pleasantly surprised with. When we were top 8, we're like, okay, top 8's like the worst place to finish. Like, you don't earn that much money, you don't guarantee yourself an invite. Like, you just look kind of okay. Nobody really cares about you. Like you're good enough to have gone further, but you didn't. And so winning the top 6 match is what we were really, really like thrilled about, having defeated a team that a lot of people kind of came in and said these guys are favorites, and earning some fans, earning some money, hopefully earning an invite to the next major. So I think we were really, really happy about that. And then afterwards, of course, we had to play EG, which is a team that just seems to have our number. I'm confident that once we finally beat them, we're going to be able to start evening up that record pretty quickly. But for right now, there's a little bit of I don't know. They're just good. They're just very good. But I would say that we exceeded our expectations just a little bit. But we certainly did not hit our ceiling.
I'm curious about like the effect of like, Kyle's leadership for the team. Because correct me if I'm wrong. Is he like I know he's like drafter, but is he also the in-game captain for the team?
Yes.
So like I get like, just the sense I got from just his short time on the broadcast panel is that he's like pretty confident and also quite opinionated about his ideas.
Oh yes.
Do you feel like that has like a very positive effect on your team's mentality? Does it like give them that kind of like rigidity and like, definitely ability to bend but not break?
Yes and no. Kyle's an extremely motivated person, and he's going to work really hard in almost every case to try to be the best. He's got that big chip on his shoulder, and that's where the motivation comes from. At the same time, he can be a very emotional person. And like you said, he can be very stubborn in the way that he thinks. And so as a result of that, he is very good about giving the team a game plan as long as things are in a positive space. But if something starts to go a little bit negative, the leadership and the ability to function as a team can sometimes suffer as a result of it. But that's where it's really good that we have the team that we have, because, I mean, it's no secret that we've had a lot of turnover over the last year and a half. Yeah. And I would say that a good portion of that is because of Kyle. Kyle is a great captain, but he's extremely difficult to work with. Like, really, really difficult to work with sometimes because he's so stubborn. You either do it my way or not. And he can sometimes hurt people's feelings. He's very much like a football player. Like, he's going to go out, he's going to yell at you until you're perfect and whatnot.
Quarterback,
people
right?
Can't handle that. This team, for the most part, is able to handle that. And they understand sometimes he's just going to be talking out of his ass and he just needs to talk. But most of the time, he's going to be coming up with very good plans, and they need to be listening to him. And they're willing to listen to him. Even if they're pissed off at him because he was just a dick to you, they're going to listen to him and execute the plan.
Okay. Well, talk a bit about like because I do want to take a little bit of a step back. Going into the tournament, like how was compLexity performing in scrims, and were you guys able to scrim against a lot of the teams that were heading over there? And also the team's ability to maybe adapt between the group stage, which you guys did find some difficulty, and also really perform well in the lower bracket in the following days.
Previous to flying out to China, we definitely had some good scrim partners. We'd been playing a lot against EG. I would say that they were probably our primary tier 1 scrim partner prior to releasing the groups, at which point we promptly stopped that and said, hey, forget everything you guys have learned about us in the past 2 weeks, please.
Oh, wow.
But after that, we played a little bit against Fnatic and Alliance. I think we might have played... Excuse me, not Fnatic. Virtus Pro, Alliance. I think we might have played a little bit against Secret. Yeah, we were doing all right against those tier 1 partners. At best, going 50-50, probably a little bit worse if I recall correctly. But we also had a lot of North American matches leading up to it as well, and we were riding some serious confidence coming in from that. Once we actually got to China, we had a lot of success in scrims. I want to say that over the course of all of our scrims there, we probably lost like 3 games and maybe one 20 or something like that.
Yeah, I heard some commotion about how good compLexity was doing in like the intra-tournament scrims, and it was like catching a lot of me and like my friends off guard. Were like, wait, compLexity, like the team that we know, like they're like dominant, like not losing games at all. It's pretty spooky,
I think we went like 5-0 against Alliance in scrims, which really gave us a lot of confidence against them going into it. And of course, we're able to take down quite a few Chinese teams. Ironically, or maybe yeah, just ironically, our toughest competition was perhaps Archon, who I think we dropped 2 or 3 games to. But that might just be, North American rivalry. I don't know what that was.
Yeah, something in the way.
The Archon roster, or much of it, used to be under the complexity flag, right? Were you around, like, in the Dota 2 team at that time, too?
I had just joined the organization when the old Fire complexity team went to Liquid.
Oh, okay. That would have been, I don't know, that would be interesting, because within the scene, like, there are a lot of familiar faces in, kind of in similar places, or like a bit of a washing machine kind of thing where everybody rotates around a little bit. So, I don't know, I wonder if that comes into play where, say, your relationships with former teammates or anything like that, and, if that changes how you view or how you deal with players and all that, knowing that one day they could be on your squad and one day they could be elsewhere and one day they could come back.
Well, I think it definitely does. At least for as far as me as a manager, my managerial style, never burn a bridge unless you absolutely have to, and I think that served me pretty well. I think that there's a lot of players that we could potentially end up with again, years down the road or whatnot. I don't want to say that we're ever making changes to this roster, and I sincerely hope that we don't, but the fact of the matter is that somebody eventually is going to want to retire or leave and go join a new team or something like that, and who knows, maybe Moon will end up back on our team or something. We still have very good relationships with a lot of those players.
So, well, as you mentioned that you guys announced, I think, earlier today that you were keeping the roster intact for Manila and TI. So, right? So if what were your thoughts on that? And I assume the team is very confident given the performance and wants to keep it together.
Yep, that's pretty much where it is. The only even most basic of concerns was once again just Kyle just kind of trying to play nice, because there's a big personality difference between the team. Kyle's an extreme extrovert, and he's just, he's loud and boisterous and needs to yell and be emotional and all these things, and the rest of the team is relatively reserved. So it's a constant struggle to try to help him kind of maintain that energy, but remove the somewhat negative side of it, because for him, like, he's not even trying to be a dick or anything, he's just trying to help the team get better, but the rest of the team feels like, oh, you're attacking me or something like that. And so that was the only even remote concern about the team, was like, is he going to be able to keep this in check? Is everybody feeling confident to lock in for another 6 months? And we're good.
I've got to ask you, Beef, because we've seen this kind of recently with a number of teams, but sometimes it seems like, even teams with, or basically every team is going to have internal struggles, and sometimes it doesn't stop teams from really achieving greatness, say winning TI, for example, this past year, or having good success elsewhere. Does this almost have to be like an unstable kind of dynamic where you need that internal struggle, but you can hold it together so that the team can still compete? Or do you think it's possible, really, or ideally, to have a team where everyone's on pretty good terms?
I would certainly say it's ideal to have everyone on good terms. Maybe if there's internal rivalries or something in the team, maybe that sparks them to work harder and, one up the other guy or something. But I don't know. I've never been in a situation where I've seen that as healthy and productive.
Well, all right. Or it's like,
Go ahead.
well, I was just gonna say that I'm not sure if there's any kind of team that we can really point to that was not going through some phase of difficulty, and if complexity is in the current situation as it is right now and still trying to mold Swindle into like the people person for his teammates, and they're still able to perform quite decently well after the Shanghai Major, then there's still quite a lot of potential, like looking afterwards, in terms of just how the team chemistry works and the dynamic works, right?
Yeah. I mean, I want to clarify. It's not trying to mold Swindle into a people person or anything. He's a very social person. He's a social butterfly, is what I call him.
Okay.
It's more so just trying to meet in the middle from both sides. One side being like, hey, even if I'm telling you, hey, don't fuck that up again, like, it's not me attacking you. It's like trying to remind you, hey, don't fuck that up again. Like, reminder, don't go for that rune. Don't TP in this situation. And the other side, this is your friend, this is your teammate, this is your captain. Like, they're not attacking you. they're trying to help you become a better Dota player, and it's trying to find that healthy medium there in the middle. And then sometimes it's even on the responsibility of the support staff to make sure to minimize the chances for those interactions to actually happen by removing the emotional component and making sure that things like team discussion are done outside of an emotional area, and so significantly after the scrims or matches or whatnot.
Right. What do you think if there's any effect at all? Well, you guys have two pairs of brothers, right?
Yep.
On in terms of like stuff like communication and between these two, the two brothers, and does this affect the team dynamic in a significant way? Do you think it gives any advantage?
I think it gives advantage because they know each other really well. Specifically, they've been playing with each other really well, or for a long time as well. But with that same being said, I don't think that the brother dynamic specifically gives them an advantage. I think it's just as a result of knowing the people and having played together for a long time. You talk about somebody like Ake and Loda, they can build up the same kind of rapport and ability to communicate just like any of these brothers, or even No Tail and Fly. I mean, I think that they know each other really well in that regard. So I think it certainly helps because it's a cool story and because it adds some team stability when you're like, okay, well, I'm feeling kind of frustrated, but my brother's here. Like, we're going to just persevere. Don't want to be an outcast from my family or something like that.
Yeah, just imagine the dinner tables.
Yeah,
like they're disbanded, right?
Exactly.
Kind of awkward during Christmas time.
Z-Freak jokes about that pretty frequently. He's like, I've been playing with him for like 5.5 years now, and I'm pretty sure my family would actually just like, kick me out. I'm just excommunicated from the family if I ever left.
Wow.
Your team is unique in a bunch of other ways. You have the two brothers, but also, I brought this up at the tournament, but you guys have a team house, which I think most other NA teams or Western teams in general don't really train in that kind of environment. And you have a chef and morale officer, maybe sports psychologist, so to speak. How did those decisions come about? And how do you think that how do you think that impacts your team?
That's pretty much exclusively from Swindle. Like I said, I was making moves to pick him up before he ever played his first game of Dota. We were already in the signing process by the time that he had 4 players on a team. And as a result of that, I've made it very clear, and our owners have made it very clear, that we are going to help guide him, but he has pretty free reign when it comes to decisions with the team. And one of the things that he's adamant about is that in order to create the best performance possible and the best environment possible, a team needs to be in a house where they're thinking, watching, playing Dota like 16, 18 hours a day, where they're able to just sit there and say, hey, here's my teammate in the kitchen. Let's go ahead and talk about this new strategy that I was wanting to run. And as a result, I think that it really has helped us improve quite a bit. However, on the opposite side, when we were actually looking for players, there were a lot of players that were like some high-profile players that were interested in joining the team, but they did not want to live in the team house. They're comfortable where they are. They don't want to move away from family or girlfriends or something like that. And it doesn't even matter if it's a huge mansion on the water, a former NFL player's house where they're going to have their own room and a chef and maids and all this stuff taken care of for them. They just want to be at home. And so that it can be kind of a detriment, but it's one of the reasons that we're really happy to have the group of guys we have right now, because this team house, as Kyle said, was designed with these players in mind. And so we've got the band kind of together now, and we're going to do everything that we can to make sure that they don't go anywhere, including spending quite a bit of money on the house and the chef and all that kind of stuff.
This is really interesting because the team house model, as I mentioned, is more of like an Eastern thing. Like Chinese teams, for the most part, have team houses, although they're under very tight control usually. But in the Western scene, people tend to, like live on their own and play a lot of pubs. Maybe they don't even practice together that much until it's boot camp time. So you guys have kind of an Eastern training philosophy, so to speak, for a Western team. So I found that to be really interesting.
I would say, I've been doing esports for a long time, so I know what you're referencing, especially over there in like Korea and China and whatnot, where they have very strict policies, and a coach living in the house with them that's making sure that they're up at a certain time, and this is gym time, and this is practice time, and this is eating time, and this is sleeping time. I want to be clear; it's very much so not like that.
It's no boot camp.
Yeah, it's no boot camp. I mean, they are there. It's their house. It's like Hansken sold his apartment in Sweden. Like, these guys are in the process of applying for 2-year visas to live in the United States. As far as the United States is concerned, at that point, they are residents of the United States. Like, these guys live there. It is their house. And as a result, I mean, they're gonna have fun. They went out jet skiing with a couple of friends a couple of days ago and whatnot. Like, they're there to have fun. But work time is work time, and so they certainly do a very good job of balancing the two, although sometimes it requires a little bit of a nudge from yours truly.
So it's work hard, play hard. That's really cool.
Oh yeah.
Get off that cell phone game and log on to Dota. Like, what are you wasting your time with there?
There are times when I've said those exact words.
Wow.
All right. That's really cool, and I'm glad that for Kyle, for example, you've talked about as motivated as he is, and as much as he cares about esports, and the development, that he's taken that initiative, and that your organization has given him a chance to make those kinds of decisions. Because we have talked about how the players in Dota or in various esports have different levels of kind of power and influence, and it seems that a conscious decision was made in your organization to kind of empower Kyle, so to speak, and let him judge what was best. And can you talk about a little bit more about what went into that, or maybe times that you've had to help rein Kyle in, or you have a very unique relationship with him, obviously, so I'd like to ask you more about that.
Like I said, I've known Kyle since, I've known of Kyle since 2009, 2010, back in the early Han days. After that, I actually met him for the first time in 2012 and hated him. Absolutely hated him. Thought he was just a douchebag and just couldn't stand him. And at that time, of course, I was on compLexity and he was on his own brand, Stay Green. The teams were rivals. He had a big rivalry with PPD, who was the captain of my team. And so he was just, he's how he is, He's like gonna bluster, and he's gonna, if he's in a position where he feels like he has the upper hand and confidence, he's gonna make sure that you know that. And I think that, in the last almost 4 years now, he's matured a lot, but it was very difficult to like him at that point. But over the next couple of years, I saw him at more and more events, and we certainly developed a little bit of a rapport. He actually offered me a job as a caster, moving into his old Miami team house back in like 2013, which I declined, of course, staying with compLexity. But in 2014, I said, hey, if we're looking for a Dota team, he has no desire whatsoever to play Dota. He wants to go do real life things now. He thinks his esports career is done. He set out for his goals and accomplished them. And so I spent some time working with him. I was helping him, apply for jobs and writing letters of recommendations for him and that kind of stuff. And just kind of whispering in his ear a little bit, like, hey man, like, you should see this this TI. Like, Peter's going to play in it. There's going to be a lot of money in this. And he's like, what? No. I'm like, what's going on there? And eventually I was like, yo, you need to play Dota. Like, you need to. He's like, no, I don't like the game. And I dropped $50 and bought him a compendium and a bunch of like power-ups for the compendium so that he could level really fast. And then he felt obligated. He played and played and played. And in the next 2 months, he hit like 6,300 and was averaging like 13 games a day or something like that.
Holy crap.
And I was like, so you like the game now? He's like, yeah. Gotta build a team. And so at that point, we started having meetings with my owners, brought them in. They were both all aboard the hype train, and we started setting out ground rules. We're not here to babysit you. We are not here to run your entire life. We are here to advise you. Sometimes we're going to advise you with a rather firm hand, but a lot of the stuff we're going to allow you to kind of make the decisions yourself. But Kyle, being the person that he is and the respect that he had for me as well as our owners, uh, we try to tackle most things that we can as a group. Sometimes one side gets stubborn or whatnot, but between me and Kyle, we generally handle most of like the roster decisions and whatnot, all that kind of stuff. And then Chef Josh is actually Kyle's kind of like moral compass sometimes when I'm not in the house, and certainly helps to make sure that he doesn't go out of control there. And even Kyle's dad, Papa Freak, I mean, he's made it out to a bunch of lands before, but he's actually relatively involved in the process, especially when it comes to Kyle making significant decisions. He kind of runs it by like myself and Jason Bass and Josh and his dad, and that's like his kind of checksum of making sure that things go well. And yeah, I mean, I would say that that's the crew, other than the time in which we were in contract negotiations for like 3 months after TI, in which I was living in the same room as him at our old team house at the time, but he was specifically not talking to me because his lawyers were advising him to not talk to me for a period of like 3 weeks because we were in contract negotiations. And so that was fun.
Seems kind of awkward, I guess, but
very
well. Who's the who's like the team like prankster or jokester? I kind of want to get a feel for like the personalities on the team.
Oh man, I would say probably Hanskin. Hanskin's like super high energy most of the time, especially if you get some coffee or an energy drink in him. He's a caffeine addict, so he's super high energy, and so he'll just be kind of cracking off on things. And he and Josh get along really, really well. Josh is only like 18, so he's like super young, and they listen to the same kind of music, and they like to party together, and just they have lots of fun together. So I would say he's definitely the jokester of the team. I think Limp is definitely the like kind of the stoic almost of the team. He's like very much so just wants to play Dota, and he's definitely going to have fun if everybody else like invites him to go have fun and whatnot. But his main focus generally seems to be on Dota. But he certainly likes to go out, and he loves dancing. He and Swindle both love dancing, and so they specifically like to go out to clubs and whatnot, especially when we're on the road and have the time. They'll go out to dance clubs and whatnot. They did that quite a few times in China. Chessie is the opposite of Kyle. Like if Kyle's up here and he's like, you guys can't see me, of course. If he's like, super emotional and very up and down and whatnot, like Chessie's the stable current in the middle that kind of reels him back in. And because they've had such a long relationship and rapport, they're very good at actually kind of interacting, and Chessie's definitely able to say, Kyle, like, no, you're wrong, like, shut up, like it's time to cool down. We need to center up, and Kyle's generally pretty good at doing that. And then if it doesn't work with Chessie, then it generally works with Z-Freak. Otherwise, it erupts in a shouting match, because Z-Freak is like the final barrier. Where like if Zach is mad, like some shit has gone like really bad.
Yeah, your pager's blowing up. If Zach is mad, you got to get to the house soon.
Yeah, exactly. And so Zach is like the definition of the Dota grinder. He like literally just wants to play Dota. Like he plays Dota with the team, and then as soon as he's done with the team, he goes to his room and plays Dota in his room. He's playing with his like little brothers. There's 3 other Friedman brothers that all play Dota together and whatnot, and playing pubs with them or grinding Element TD. And I think I had even mentioned it on Twitter that one of the reasons that our room did not get vandalized at the Shanghai Major was because Zach was in there. We had no internet. No internet on the computers, but Zach was like grinding bot matches to like try to figure out new things.
Wow.
No, that was when I read that on Twitter. I think I was like, hey, that's inspiring. Like that's a new level of try hard offline.
Yeah. No, that's what Zach does. That's who he is. He just wants to play Dota. Any video game in the world, he just wants to play video games. Right now, it's Dota because he loves to compete and wants to, be playing with his brother and whatnot. But Zach's the kind of guy where a lot of people agree if he set his mind to it and gave it some time, he could be a pro at any game in the world.
Well,
One of my big takeaways from that is that it seems like, is it just me, or are all the mid players kind of stoic and grumpy? Like, it really seems like, just looking at some examples, I kind of feel like they're a little more introverted and withdrawn. Maybe Sumail or Miracle or Weehaw fall into that as well. So that's pretty interesting. I don't know, maybe we could start putting together like a personality test for people. If they want to find
for sure.
I think they're all younger. That could be part of it as well.
Mm.
And Limp's the youngest player on his team. He's almost 21 now. But I think that a lot of them are certainly younger, and they're maybe more individual and reserved in that fashion. And maybe that's why they're such good mid players. They're just able to do their own thing for the most part.
Well,
that's a good observation, actually. A lot of them are younger. And there was some information on that, I think, some data done on that from the last few tournaments. So, yeah, that's a really... and speaking of age and stuff, like, do you ever have to remind yourself that, hey, these guys are basically kids, or they can't legally drink or whatever yet, and do you have to take a step back when you deal with them?
Yes, absolutely. And it's actually really easy to get away because I've been doing this for a long time, and my primary interaction is with Kyle a lot of the times, and Kyle, although he can sometimes be immature in a couple ways, for the most part is a very mature, very logical person. And sometimes you have to remind yourself, like, yeah, these guys are smart and they're dedicated and they're good people, but they're young. Like they can only take so much sometimes. I had that realization a couple of times when I was kind of coming down on people maybe a little bit too hard at the Shanghai Major, and kind of had to change the way that I was going about things as well. Just because, like you said, there's only so much they can put up with, and they're doing their best as they can, and sometimes they're just not able to do any better. So yeah, it certainly takes some time for me to remember, these guys are 20, 21 years old. There's a lot going on with them. It's easy for them to become overwhelmed.
We're going to start to see a trend, or we're already starting to see a trend, kind of where younger and younger players are coming into prominence in esports. What are your thoughts on that? Is that going to produce a situation where it's harder and harder to deal with them?
Yes, 100%. There's two divergent paths. There's the path that we're currently on, which is we're going to get these, 14, 15, 16-year-old players that, are not properly represented and have not been properly indoctrinated within the industry that they're bound for. And as a result, that's going to suck really, really bad. It's going to be difficult for managers and coaches. It's going to be difficult for their teammates. It's going to be difficult for those players. However, the second, more bright option is that we go the path that things like soccer in Europe have gone, where they have like youth clubs, and they start recruiting kids at 11, 12, 13 years old, and putting them in youth clubs, putting them under the guidance of a coach, maybe even getting them a representative, an agent, when it comes to that point. And I think at that point, that's probably the best way that you can handle it. Make sure that you start them young, make sure that they're aware of the expectations, and that there's no confusion in that regard. And then you go through their agent for anything more serious, because if I had a 15-year-old player on my team, I can't talk to this 15-year-old player about why he needs to execute this part of his contract or whatnot, and why he's not able to do that. He doesn't grasp a lot of the business concepts and whatnot, and that's where he needs to be employing somebody to represent his own best interests. And I think that's actually one of the perhaps larger issues that could be facing us as we gravitate towards younger and younger, more mechanically talented players.
Very interesting. I've got one more big question for you as well. Given your background in basically media and esports, which has kind of a unique relationship. Obviously, it didn't grow together with conventional sports, with the same way rather that it did in conventional sports. And in many ways, the media and esports is defanged, or to some extent a bit marginalized. Can you talk about what are your thoughts on that, and do you think that needs to change? Is this a balance that would, for example, hurt the players or hurt the growth of the game in the long run?
I'm sorry, the question kind of confused me a little bit. Are you able to restate that?
So yeah, basically the media in esports. I mean, I think for the most part right now, it's in a bit of a marginalized position compared to where it is in, say, traditional sports. And do you think that this will continue, or does there need to be some kind of initiative to strengthen the media, or do you think it's just fine where it is since you have some experience and background
Okay.
in that?
Yeah, I definitely think that something needs to happen. There needs to be some kind of collective bargaining, and right now, I think that especially in Dota, with the three major studios in the Western region, being BTS, Join Dota, and to some extent Moonduck, I think that there's a lot of disagreements between those, and the collective bargaining isn't realistic. And as a result, whenever there's not collective bargaining, then the people that want to employ casting studio or whatnot, they can say, "Oh, if you're not going to do it at this price, I'm going to go to these guys because they're going to do it at that price." Whereas if there was one firm option, like the Russian studios who have RU Hub now that just kind of took over Storm Crow or Storm whatever studios, they can kind of name their price, they can name their conditions a little bit more. So I think that that's something that's very important that's going to need to change. And I think that's one thing that James is actually working on. He had talked about heading back to Twitch, Too Good, of course,
Yeah.
and working on a like a talent union or broadcasting union, producers union, whatever it is that he has kind of going on over there, or maybe a broadcasting association or something that hopefully can start to manage a little bit of that. But as we've seen with past unions of teams or of players, they've been very unsuccessful in esports thus far, with limited amounts of power and limited amounts of widespread success. So I think that James is definitely one of those people that can put something like that together, but I don't know if everyone realizes the level of undertaking that something like that is. It needs a dedicated person, if not a dedicated staff, to running that day to day. It's not something that you do as a part-time job if you want that to be successful.
I mean, it's pretty incredible just that we're talking about stuff like collective bargaining agreements and some kind of organized, entity to perform those things in our scene. I think James specifically has always tried to take an active role in terms of making the system work a bit better for the people and the casters and the talent.
Mm-hmm.
I do want to ask at least once before we go away. Did you have a chance to really interact with 2GD and when you found out that he was hosting, and did you have anything to comment on his situation?
My interaction with James was relatively minimal at the event. I was keeping myself busy with one of the other dozens of things that were going wrong,
kind of putting out fires.
Yeah, just kind of copious things that were going wrong at that point. I think the day that he was fired, I was running around with my Chinese rulebook trying to get an English copy. So I definitely did not have a lot of interaction. However, Swindle did. Swindle and James actually go back quite a bit, and I believe that James's last night that he was in the country, he actually spent with Josh and Swindle out at a bar and a club pretty much all night. So
I think I saw some pictures.
Yeah, they certainly had some good interactions.
Okay. Well, to close it out, when Swindle actually went to the broadcasting couch, I felt like his kind of prophetic view of complexity's performance at the tournament was kind of fulfilled. I mean, their finish was very respectable, top 5 or top 6. And he also said some things about the NA Dota scene in general. And he identified the Chinese scene as kind of lagging, and he was like, I think that NA Dota is something really serious to be taken, and I guess the performance shows that. What do you think the NA Dota scene is right now? Do you think that there's things holding it back in terms of its performance, or do you think that with the performance of Complexity and EG doing so well at the majors, it's really taking steps forward?
Anytime the teams at the top take a leap forward, it's going to open up space for the teams below them to improve and kind of take that spot again. So Complexity's traditionally hovered in that 15 to 20 in global rank, maybe even 15 to 25 global rank over the past year and a half. And so with us ideally moving up into top 10, top 8, top 6, wherever it is that we're going to be after this next major, then that opens up space for teams like Archon or DC or even Elite Wolves to kind of occupy that space. And ideally, as the teams at the top get better, that's going to be trickling down to your scrim partners and your regional opponents and whatnot as they start to play better teams. So I certainly hope that NA Dota is going to start to improve in that regard. However, I think that the things holding back NA Dota are actually kind of similar to the things that are holding back production, and that everybody's got their own best interests in mind, and they're not always able to put aside some squabbles to make sure that it's kind of best for building a team or stability and whatnot. Even like Archon, they're trying out new players right now, and they got back from a major, and they're like, I don't know what their final roster is going to be right now, but it's certainly not the one that was playing at the major. DC, I mean, it looks like they've made a couple of changes and whatnot. So there's a lot of instability associated with the North American scene right now, and we certainly were large contributors to that instability in the past. I think we famously went through 37 players over the course of 3 months.
Wow.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, that's like next level instability right there.
There's the revolving door, glass door.
Player every 3 days. That's wow.
Yeah, no, it was like even more than that. We would go through like multiple players in one day. Like we would wake up and ask Swindle like, "Oh, who are we scrimming with today?" And he'd be like, "All right, we're testing this guy, and this guy. They're each getting like 3 games each or something." And of course, Swindle, I mean, he's the guy that does everything for the team. The rest of the team, they're to play Dota and have fun, and they're going to help when they're asked to help out. But Kyle's the guy with all the initiative. And so he's the person finding the rosters. He's the one that handled, contract negotiations. He's the guy that found the house and, all these different things. So he really does put in a huge amount of work for the team to try to create the best conditions possible. And so he, of course, was doing his best at this event to try to talk to some of the guys from Archon and some of the guys from DC about trying to increase the stability in the scene, because he wants to be proud of this region. He wants to be the best in this region and the best in the world. And he knows, just like a lot of us do, that there is talent here, significant talent here, but it's not being exercised in the correct way. The work ethic isn't always there. The priorities aren't always there. And, of course, the interpersonal relationships aren't always in the correct spot either.
All right. Thank you so much, Beef. We're going to let you off the hook, and we know that, of course, Complexity has a match in about 15 minutes, so best of luck with that. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak and hang out with us, and you have any other final shout-outs or any mentions you want to throw out there?
I want to thank you guys, especially you, Jack, for having me on. It was definitely a pleasure being here and being able to talk with you guys. I'm always happy to be an evangelist for my team as well as the scene. I think that we need more fans. Be our fan. That's what you can do. Just be our fan. We're a hard-working group of guys, and hopefully we'll be able to make the scene and the entire Dota region proud at the upcoming events. We've got Dota Pit in like 3 days, so make sure to tune in for that. We're playing Virtus Pro in the first round. But yeah, shout out to the entire Complexity organization, everybody that kind of helps to make things possible, and of course the team, Swindle, Hanskin, Limp, Chessie, Z-Freak, as well as Josh and Fantasy, who helped out immensely as well. They do really great things for the org. Follow me on Twitter, COL_beef. That's about it.
All right, thanks a lot. As he said, COL_beef on Twitter. To follow the team, it's at Complexity Live, and of course you can visit their website, complexitygaming.com. They've got a bunch of interviews and awesome content on there, including some pictures from the Shanghai Major, as worked very hard to put together all that media stuff, and it's great. Make sure to go check it out. Defenseofthepatients.com is our website. That's defense with an S, where you can find this episode and others before and after. And for Twitter, for us, it's at DOTP_show. And I am at KBBQ Dota. My co-host is at Woodshrew Dota. Tomorrow's show, as usual, is Theorycraft Thursdays with Ursinity and Proud. And of course, if you visit the website, click through the Amazon banner to support us and all our DOTP network of shows. We have some announcements and other content coming up soon in the next few months, and we'll continue to grow and try to provide quality Dota content. Thank you once again, Beef. Thanks, Shrew, and we'll see you guys next week.